This conference will now be recorded.
Any questions, Ramesh or Krishna?
No, sir. Not for me.
Okay. Okay, so this will be your GDE, graphical development environment, which will it looks like, right? How it looks like. So you'll be having GDE license activated once you started working on for any client. So once you open the GDE, okay, so what we will be doing, right, in the actual case, right? So very first time when you open the GDE, what are the things we have to do? And what are the steps we have to do, right, for developing the graph, right? We're going to see today. Okay, so how to build the graph, how to execute the job, right, and how to see the data. All those things we can cover today. Okay, so today, like you can see, okay, so basics of GDE. Okay, so connection settings with host. Okay, connection settings with host. And then we'll talk about input file component, output file component. Okay, so sort component. Building of graph and execution of graph. Right, so we'll see all these things today. Okay, so when you go to the GDE, right, so this is my GDE, how it looks. You could see a white space, right, so which is called as a canvas or workspace. Okay, this is called as a canvas or workspace where I can use it to define the graph, right? To define the graph, this is the workspace I'm going to use it. And on the right hand side, you can see the components hierarchy, right? Folder structure. So this component folder structure is nothing but it's called as a organizer, right? It's called as a organizer, component organizer. So you can close this window, organizer, and then even if you want to open it also, you can see it with the option of view component organizer, right? View component organizer. So once you click on this F9, so you can see the shortcut, right? Shortcut is F9. F9 is the shortcut, right? Where I can open the component organizer, right? And you can close it also from here also, right? So you can use the F9 function key, or you can go with the view option, okay, to open or close. And these are the toolbars, right, which have been opened here. Okay, so we'll learn right one by one once we started working using it. Okay, so the very first thing we will be doing is we need to make the connection settings, right? So we have to look after this point, right, which is connection settings with the host machine. So what is meant by host? What is meant by host? Yesterday we are talking about architecture, right? What I mentioned, like
the server and our operating system.
So the server component, right? So that means it's a Unix server where the co-operating system is installed, right? It's a Unix environment, Unix server where the co-operating system is installed. That machine is called as a host machine. That Unix machine is called as a host machine. Okay. So like GD is a client for you, and host is the host contains co-operating system, and that is nothing but it's a server component, right? So you can connect to that server component from the GDE, right? So we have to connect with, right? So what will happen? Suppose say using GDE, okay, using GDE, what are you going to do? You can develop the graph, right? You can develop the graph, right? So you can develop the graph, okay, and we can execute the graph. We can execute the graph. Srinivas, what's your background currently? What platform you're on?
Yeah, hi. I'm currently working as a PLSQL developer in City Corporation, Citibank.
Oh, that is Chennai.
I have I have 10 plus years of experience in Oracle PLSQL developer.
Okay, okay, yeah, okay. So we have this
Mm.
city in Chennai and Pune, right?
Yeah, Chennai.
Okay,
Currently, I'm working in Chennai.
okay, okay.
Due to one of the project I have where she's running an Abinitio, for that I will need an Abinitio tool.
Got it, got it. Yeah, I got it. Yeah, one of the major client.
Yeah.
Okay. Let me know if you have any questions. Okay. So within this, anyhow, you'll catch up. You can catch up that right architectural session after the session, right?
Yeah, sure, sure.
Okay. So we can develop the graph here, and we can execute the graph, and we can check the status of the graph, right? So we can check the status of the graph. Okay. So all these things can be happen with the help of GDE, right? So how can we define the graph? How can we define the graph? What we can say, like, what is a graph means?
Consists of components,
Consists of components, right?
sections,
Right.
components of collection.
Right. Consists of components. Okay. And the graph will be saved with the extension.
Dot
Graph will be
ksh.
saved KSH. So that means you will have actual graph, actual graph with dot .mp, and a dot .ksh file will be generated, which is called as a deployed script for the graph, right? So which
Yeah,
is called
yes.
as deployed script of the graph. Okay. So now, okay, so when we develop the graph and execute the graph and check the status of the graph and all, right? So where do the graph will be saved? Where can I save the graph?
In
Be on the
dot
server.
MP file.
Should
When
be
the
on the
MP
server.
yeah. So the graph will be saved in host machine, right?
in
I can
host.
say host.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, I could say it's a host machine. Okay, that is Unix. Okay, so what else I will be having, right? What else host contains? Host contains what? Like you are storing the code. Okay, Abinitio code will be stored here.
Abinitio binaries.
Yeah, stored. And then Abinitio binaries are nothing but operating system is installed here. Okay, operating system is installed. Okay, and then the data files will be stored here. Okay, and intermediate ETL files, right? Intermediate ETL files will be stored here.
Sorry, Srinivas, can you go on mute?
Sure.
Yeah,
Sorry.
yeah. I'm about to say that. Yeah, that's fine, Krishna. Yeah. Okay, this is fine, right? Host contains Abinitio code. One thing. We'll store the Abinitio code, and the operating system is installed here within the host, and data files will be stored here, and intermediate ETL files will be stored here, right? So this host. Okay. So okay. So now coming to the connection, right? So we have to make this connection, right? Why? Because within the host only I have the COP installed, right? Operating system is installed. So very first thing is whenever you join in any project, okay, whenever you join in any project, you cannot start the work immediately, but you need some basic things to be raised, right? So you have to raise the request for, okay, we have to raise the request for what? So raise the request for GDE activation, okay, license activation, and host access, that means the Unix access, and then we'll have the EMA access request, right? So all these access requests should be done, right? Then once you got the access, then only you could start working on the development, right? So certainly you'll have the user ID, right? So you'll
Sorry,
be having user ID. Yeah.
sorry, Kumar, one doubt here. May you know what is the EME access?
EME is a repository. Okay, EME is a repository. To right to connect with the repository, we should have an access.
Okay.
Okay. What is about EME and all, you can find it in the yesterday session, right? So you can go through it. So if you have anything, we can discuss later.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so once you have an access, right? So basically you'll have a developer ID being created, right? So whenever you log into this right client machines, right, you'll have an ID, developer ID being generated. Okay, so let's say that I have your IDs created. Okay, for you, I created one ID for each and every user, right? Okay, so these are your IDs. Let's say that these are your IDs. So you'll be using these IDs to log in into the client VDS, right? So client VDS, you can log in with this VDS with this user ID, and even this user ID will be used to log into the Unix also, right? To log into the Unix also, I'll be using the same ID. So the same ID and password, whatever you're using in the Unix machine to connect with, those details I have to define it in the GDE host settings, right? So we have to do the GDE host settings, right? So how to start with the GDE host settings is nothing but run settings. Okay, run settings, and then click on the new button. Okay, click on the new button. So once we went to this window, right, it's a profile window where we can provide the inputs. Okay, so here you can see the method, right, connection method, which method I have to use it for connection. So you can see so many options in the current versions, right? What you can see is the additional option is which OS you're using, right? We'll be having one more option, right? One more option to check out and to select, right, which is your host. Okay, so the host like Unix host or a Windows host, right? So we'll have the operating system, right? Operating system selection. So drop down list, right? So we'll be selecting the Unix, right? So obviously it will be selecting the Unix in the real time, and then come to the method. Okay, so whenever you select Unix as a operating system, then you can find the options REXEC, Telnet, and SSH. These three options will be visible when you select the Unix. Okay, the first two options and the last option, right? The first option and the last option. Okay, that is for Unix. In case of Windows, right? So it is local entity host. So if it is a Windows, it is local entity host. So this is for Windows. Ignore these two options. These two are not available in the current versions. Okay, so these two you can avoid, right? But in the real time, the host will be always Unix environment, right? And the host will be always Unix environment. So what will be the connection methods here? Okay, connection method. So I'm selecting the OS as Unix. Okay, OS as Unix. And connection methods, what I'll be having is REXEC, Telnet, and then SSH, right? So most of the times the connection method which you could use is SSH, right? You'll come to know anyhow what method you have to follow according to your environment. So most of the products will be with SSH only. So we have the Unix flavors, right? Flavors of Unix, right? So like different companies are having right different their own Unix operating systems available, right? So Sun Solaris, Linux, right? HP Unix, IBM AX, right? So all these different kind of servers are there, but anyhow, any server is okay, right? It will looks like it behaves like same, right, for you. Okay, it won't make any difference for you, right? So whenever you use the Unix as a operating system, so the connection method mostly it would be SSH. Okay, so you'll select the SSH as a connection method. Okay, so once we selected this, right, you could see the host, login, and password. The host is nothing but the IP address of your host machine. Okay, the IP address of my host machine. Okay, and login ID is nothing but, as I told you, the user ID, right? The user ID, whatever you have it, right? So this is the user ID. You can define the user ID. Okay, and then you can see the passwords. You can give the password of the Unix machine, and host directory optional. You could give the home path. Okay, well, they'll be having default directory, right? Default directory which is available. That option is available. You can give the default directory as your home path. Okay, so what would be the default directory for this is nothing but, okay, for this is default directory is home followed by K345, right? K345, right? So this is my default directories. So this is the home path, right? This is the home path. Clear? Any questions? Okay, so once we had given this, right? So the co-operating system is available, right? So this option is like the location, the where the co-operating system is installed within the host level, right? The location I have to provide. So how would I find what is the location of my co-operating system in the host? Just if we are talking about the host, right? The co-operating system install path. How can you find it? What is the parameter? What is the parameter I could use it? You remember? Krishna, Ramesh. AB home, right? AB home parameter. Okay. So when we check the value of $AB home,
$.
right? So you could find the path, right, where my co-operating system is installed. Okay, so you can take this path and keep it here, right? And version is by default automatic. Okay, so automatically it will take latest version, and the shell type is Unix corn shell, right? So Unix corn shell KSH. So this is the connections, right? Which I would be giving, right, in general. So this is the connections. How would I give the properties of each and every connection, right? How I have to give. Once I had given all these details, I click on the test login, right? So this is the way we have to provide the inputs. Okay, so but here this connection will not work. Just I'm showing you in case if you're working with the host as Unix in the real-time environment, how it looks like. But this will not work here as this is not existing, right? So this server is not existing here. Okay, so here in this environment, the only change, as I explained yesterday, right? The host will be Windows, right? The host will be Windows, but in the real time, it will be Unix environment. Okay, so anything is fine, right? So both are OSs only, right? So as I mentioned here, right, what my host is going to do, whenever you see the Abinitio code is stored, it will be stored in the Unix in the real time. Here itself, it will be on Windows, right? So if you created a graph and all, right, if you want to save it, you will be saving it in the Windows platform, right? So you will store it in some of the folder structure, right, in your local. But in the actual environment, it will be on the Unix server. Right? In the actual environment, it will be on the Unix server. And co-operating system is installed on the Windows here, and there itself it will be on the Unix. And even the data files will be stored in the Windows here, and in the real time it will be on Unix. Even the intermediate ETL files, right, will be stored in the Windows here. In the real time it will be on the Unix. Okay, that is the change. Okay, so now we'll see the connection with the Windows, right? So in this environment, how to connect with, right? As I'm working with the Windows here. So the Windows connection method is local NT host, right? So Windows connection method, I'm not sure, right? So not I'm mentioning, right? So important, why? Because we will not use in the real time. So here itself only we're using. So just the method is local NT host, and then obviously these will be disabled as we will not have all these properties. And then automatically you can see the location of the COP where it is installed, right? In the Windows it is available here, and the shell will be anti-batch file, right? Automatically been selected. So just you click on change this local NT host and then click on the test login. That's it. So you should see this message, run settings verified, right? So even if we are working with the Unix environment in the real time also, you should see this, right? Run settings verified, right? Output window, so that you can see the connection setting is been established. Okay, so once we're done this, we're okay with the start with the graph creation. Okay, so these are the components, right? These are the components what I have it. So within this component organizer, right? Within this component organizer, so you could see the data sets as a folder, right? So the data sets folder is the one, right? Once you expand it, you could see the components, right? So we have the input file, drag and drop, right? Just drag and drop input table. Okay, and then intermediate file, lookup file, output table, right? We'll be using all this. So like, yeah, we'll talk each and everything later, but for now I'll use this input file, output file, right? Which I'll be using. In case if you want to read data from the database or write data to the database tables, then I'll be using these two components. Okay, if I want to read the data from the data files, right? So dot files with any kind of comma delimiter files or pipe separated files, right? So you can use this components, right? Input file and output file components. Okay, so we need to define the properties, right? So let's talk about the input file component for now. Okay, so let's talk about the input file component. Okay, so when you want to see the properties of this input file component, right, what you have to do is, so click on the properties, double click on the component. Okay, double click on the component, you could see the properties window will be opened. Okay, so when we talk about a file, right, let's talk about the file types. Okay, in terms of Abinitio, so we are talking about the file types. So one is serial file, another one is multi-file. Okay, other one is multi-file. So serial file is nothing but it's a flat file, right? Serial file is nothing but it's a flat file, right? So any comma, any delimiter specified file. Okay, delimiter specified file. Okay, so let's say that I have a file called as abc.dat. Okay, so the data looks like this. Okay, data looks like this. So which is a comma separated file. Okay, this is a comma separated file. Okay, so this flat file, when you call it in terms of Abinitio, so you can call it as a serial file. Okay, I can call it as a serial file. So when you define the serial file into the component, right? When you want to define this in the input file component, okay, so we will have two properties, right? So when you click on this properties, you'll have the URL, right? So where the file is located and what is the file name, right? Where the URL is, what is the location of the file and what is the file name, right? And when you are reading the file, you should have some record structure also, right? So what are the fields of each and every file is having, right? So that field information, right? Field data, like each and every field information, we need to define it in the ports tab, right? So within the ports, when you click on the new button, you can define it here. Okay. So we'll see how to define it. Okay. So the serial file, when we talk about serial file, the URL how you define is file colon. Okay, when within the URL, I have to mention like this: file colon file path slash file name. Okay, this is the URL. Okay, so when we talk about multi-file, when we talk about the multi-file, so multi-file is nothing but it is partitioned file. It is partitioned file. Okay, multi-file is nothing but it is a partitioned file. Okay, so that means with the help of with the help of partitioning components, I'll be converting a normal file into the partition file, right? So this will happen within the Abinitio itself, right? So using partitioning components, will convert a serial file to a multi-file, right? So we'll see about multi-file in a separate session, right? So right now I'm not focusing on this multi-file. So right now we'll see about serial file, how to build the graph and execute it, right? But when we talk about the multi-file URL, how we have to define is, it will be starting with M file, right? So here itself it is file colon, if it's a serial file within the syntax. Here itself it is a M file colon, multi-file colon, right? Multi-file, as it is a multi-file, it's M file colon, and then multi-file path, right? Multi-file path, and then file name, and then file name, right? So this is about URL. One of the property we have to define is URL, right? The second property is, okay, the second property is like we have to specify the record structure, right? Or record layout. Okay, record layout, we call it as a DML in terms of Abinitio, which is data manipulation language. Okay, so the record layout, suppose say I will be having a document, right, from the source. Okay, so if this is the file, right, so what is the each and every field, right? How many fields are there? What kind of data type it is, right? And what is the field name, each and every field name, right? Whether it is nullable or not, right? All this information will be available in one of the document. Okay, so we call it as a like a different naming conventions, right? Like source TRL. Okay, so source TRL document. Okay, so suppose the source TRL document is given like this, right? Okay, this is ID field. First one is ID field, and it is a number type, and it is not null, right? And second one is it's a name, right? From product name. Okay, it's a product name, and it's a varchar data type, right? Varchar data type, and it is not null. Okay, and the next is manufacture date. Okay, so it's a date type, and suppose it is nullable, right? It's nullable. So this kind of information will be available in the TRL document, right? In the TRL document, I'll be having all this kind of information. Then you'll come to know the order of the fields, right? How these are coming from the source. What is the first field, second field, and all, right? So we'll be able to understand, right, the data by looking at this metadata information. Okay, so we can call it like a metadata. This is called as a metadata, right? So source real. So based on this only, you'll be understand the data, how it looks like. Clear? Any questions?
No, Kumar.
Ramesh?
No, Kumar.
Yeah.
Hello.
Yes, Inverse.
Yeah, Kumar, one thing. So the input, basically the input file means where the source data. That's what the
Right,
meaning
right,
of this.
right,
Correct.
correct.
And we are giving that the specific file paths and the attributes of the file, basically the record structures.
Correct.
Okay, fine, clear.
Yeah. So like okay. So ideally, how it works here is, okay. So okay. So there's a landing path, okay, or NAS path, okay, and we have some other directories, right? Other directories, okay, other data locations, for serial file and multi-file. Okay, so when we are creating the graphs, right? When we are creating the graphs, okay. So within the ETL flow, okay, within the ETL flow, okay. So how it will start with, okay. So I'm just giving high level, right? So how it will start with, the first step will be read actual source data files, okay, actual source data files from landing path, okay, from landing path. Okay, so this will be reading from the actual landing path, okay, and then read the data, and then you'll process it, right? So within the graph, okay, graph one, what you'll do is you will read this data, okay, and then you'll write the data to the output, okay. So this writing the output is will be happen to the serial file location, right? We will write it into the serial file location or multi-file location, okay. So you'll be writing to anywhere, right? So this is a graph, okay. So you're reading it, and you are reading it, and then you're writing to the output. So on the next level, right, you'll have the next graph, right, where this takes the input file. The input file is a source for it, okay. So here itself, when we call this as a source at this point, and here it is called as a target, right? Whatever I am writing. So for this graph 2, right? So this one will be source here, and it will write the output to the target, right? So this way, the ETL flow will pass the data from one file to other file through the graphs, multiple graphs, right? So all the way, I'll have n number of graphs in the ETL flow, right? So let's say that I'm having graph 1 to graph 50. Just I'm giving an example, right? So in between, the data files are being landed in the host level and taken as input for the next process. Landing, reading, landing, reading, right? So this is the way how it will takes place. And finally, at the end of your ETL process, you'll load the data into the tables. Got it?
Yeah, fine.
Okay. Okay, so the record layout we have to define it, right? So the record layout DML, we call this a DML. So the DML is nothing but record structure here. So which will start with record and ends with end, right? Which will start with record and ends with end. So the first field, right? The first field is the ID field, which is a number type, right? Which is a number type. So we have the decimal as a data type here, right? Here itself I have the decimal as a data type, which is ID field. Okay, and then the varchar is nothing but it's a string type, right? It's a string type, and then the field name is product name, right? So by default it is not null. If you're not if you're defined this way, this is the not null. So we are mentioning the data type, and then we are mentioning the delimiter of the file. So the delimiter of the file is comma here, right? In case if it's a pipe, you replace this comma with pipe, right? When you define the DML. Okay, and the date part is date of YYYMMDD. So whatever date format it is, okay, whatever date format it is, and then you specify the new line character. Okay, so which is manufacture date. Okay, so the delimiter, right? The manufacture date, like after ID column, I have a comma. After product name, I have a comma. But after manufacture date, I have a next line, right? So you can see this. After ID, I have a comma as separated, right? After the product name, I have a comma separated. But after the manufacture date, I have the new line separator. Okay, so this is the DML which we have to define within the graph here. So when you go to the input file properties, URL, right? Suppose say URL I'm defining file colon. Let's say that my file is existing in the home path of mine. Okay, so I'm mentioning the home path followed by the file name. Okay, and then go to the ports tab. So click on the new button. Now you can see the record and end. The body structure is available. Okay, and you're defining these three fields in between. So once we define this, you go to the validation, right? Validate it. Okay, so once it is validated, so you are good to go with the definition of the DML here, right? Now you can see the DML is available here. Okay, so now just we define the property here. Okay, input file property. Okay, so when we are defining the input file, right, very first time before I define the properties, right, how this component looks like. So by default, this is the option. And once I define the properties, so I can change the label also, right? Just to understand, I can give some meaningful naming convention, right? Like a customer file, product file, right? Product input. You can give the naming convention of the label so that in the graph you could see that as a right reflection, right? Whatever you define it. Okay. So I'm giving the serial file as a input. Okay. So now if you take the same input file component, right? Okay. So now I'm taking this same path. Okay. But while I'm defining here, I'm not defining this file colon prefix. Okay, this file colon prefix is not been defined. Okay, so still it is a serial file only. Okay, still it is a serial file only. Okay, so now you could see the difference, right? So there's some difference. We'll talk about that. Okay, let's say that I want to define the multi-file, right? I want to define the multi-file. So this is a multi-file. So let's say that multi-file definition, how it is, m file colon. Let's say that multi-file location is like this: data, Abinitio data, MFS, and then file name. Okay, let's say that this is the multi-file. Okay, so now tell me. Okay, so whenever these two are serial files only, but as you are missing out the prefix here, it looks like a multi-file. Correct? These two looks like same, right?
Yeah, it looks same.
Okay, but I still, as I am mentioning this serial file, multi-file, right? That's how you know this is a serial file, this is a multi-file. Suppose I did not mention this, right? Suppose I did not mention these labels. I mentioned like customer file, right? You will not come to know, right? Whether it is a serial file or multi-file,
Correct.
right? If the labels are customer file, you will not know. So you need to follow the syntax. Even though I am not using this prefix, still it will work, right? It won't. I'm not saying it won't work. It works, right? But the perception will be changing. Right? The understanding will be changing. You will be thinking misunderstanding, right? Saying that okay, thinking that it is a multi-file, even though it is a serial file, right? So you will not see always the properties and all, whether it is a serial file or multi-file, right? For that purpose also, I don't require to open the properties and see, right? If the developer is following the standards, easily it will be understandable, right? So which is a serial file, which is a multi-file and all. Okay. So even though it is a valid syntax, but we'll follow the best practices of defining the serial file is use this prefix. For the serial file, that is file colon. If it's a multi-file, you define the prefix, that is m file colon. Got the point?
Yes, Kumar.
Hmm. Okay. So now we'll develop the graph, right? Now we understand the properties, what are the properties we need to define the input file, right? And we understand the file types, right? So DML. Now we'll create a graph, okay? So this is a shortcut. Click on the new button. Outer frame. Outer frame is optional, right? So just I want to show you the background, right? That's how I kept it like this. And now what I have is within this version, within the examples folder, you'll find two files. One is source file, default source file, and default target file, right? One is default source file and default target file. Okay. And in between, right, I will take some component like called as sort component. Okay. I'll take the component called as sort component. Okay, so this default file will have the properties been defined already, right? So like you see some of the databases, if you take it, right, you will have some default tables with the data, right? All the tables and data is been created for you for your practice, right? So similar to that, here also we have the files available for practice purpose, right? So you can use this input file for your practice level, right? So I will be defining this file, okay, and within the ports tab, you can see the DML, right? If you see the DML has been defined here. So, but this DML is fixed length DML, right? Fixed length DML. So where it is being defined, right? The length, how much it is maximum it can occupy. So if it is defined with 18, it means that 18 characters it can take maximum, but it can be having 4 characters also, 5 characters also, right? For input for the last name. Okay, so in the real time, we will not use the pixel length files. Okay, we'll use the delimiter files only. But for this, whatever I'm showing you, this is a delimiter file. This is pixel length file. Okay, this is pixel length file. So if you want to see the data also, right click on the component, you can see the view data option, right? And then you can see the number of records also, right? How many records you want to see? 10 records, 100 records, just end of the records, right? And keep it as a grid mode, which will look like Excel mode. Okay, and you could see the data here. Okay, so now whenever you scroll down and see, right, So within this version, right, what will happen is sometimes you will find some of the records might be missing, or sometimes you might be missing some of the fields data, right? It's a problem with the version only. It's a problem with the version only, so not with the data. So data is having complete records, right? 284 records with all the fields with data only. This view data is having an option, right? Is having an issue here. Okay, that's how you're not able to see the last fields in the last record, right? Otherwise, we are good. Okay, with the data. Okay, this is the grid view, whatever I'm showing you. But if you see the other mode, sometimes I'll be using is formatted text mode, right? So I'll show you 1 record or 2 records, right, or 10 records. Okay, so if you see this format, how it looks like. Okay, this is the data, right, of the format text mode, right? So how it looks like. Okay, so this is the view data anyhow. So now this is the output file which has been defined, right? The file name where it should be created and all. So to create a graph now, to connect the components, right? Connect the components input file with the sort component. Just connect the ports. Okay. So this is called as read port and input port, output port, and write port. Okay. So this is read. Okay. This is input. And this is output port. Okay. And this is called as a write port. And this is called as a write port. Okay. So now coming to the sort component, right? So sort component will sort the data, right? So like you do the order by class, right, in the database. So for sorting the data, I could use this component. Okay. So order by class needed the column names, right? On which column basis you have to sort it, right? On which column basis you have to sort it. Okay. So here itself key basis. So key is a parameter. If you see the properties, okay, if you see the properties, I have the description parameters, right? So the key is available. So the key is, when you select the key, you can see which column basis you want to perform the sorting, right? So you can see you can select the column, right? Suppose I want to sort it on the state basis. So select the state field, okay, which will be in the ascending order by default, which will be in the ascending order by default. So we can change it to descending also. We can change it to descending also. By default, ascending. Okay. So now once we selected this, okay, now we have defined the property, right? We have connected the flow. Now we run the job. So to run the job, this is the run button. Okay, that is F5. F5 is the shortcut to run the job. Okay, so this is the output window, what you could see here. Okay, you can close this and you can see the data here. Okay, and you change it to grid mode here and show me the data. Clear? You're able to see the data, and you can see the state field. The data has been sorted, right? Okay, clear?
Yeah, fine. Good.
Okay. So we'll see continuation, right? Tomorrow from this point.
Yeah. Kumar.
Yeah.
Yeah. Nothing. May I know about your details?
Okay, one second. Let's allow this Krishna to drop, right, so that we can talk whatever you want.
That's a drop. I think.
Oh, where is this recording? Yes, Srinivas. Go ahead, Tejas.
Nothing. See, one of my employee, right, resigned. Who is actually working on Abinitio. So for that purpose, I want to learn the Abinitio, and I found nowhere the documentation or the training videos are not available. So I searched it on the Google and I found the training institute and I joined today.
Okay, yeah. So yeah, myself, I have 13 years of experience on Abinitio,
Okay.
and we're giving this training from almost 9 years onwards.
Okay.
So we have delivered, right, so many candidates from different locations right across the globe. Okay, so
Yeah.
like US, Australia, right, Singapore,
Yeah.
South Africa, right, India.
Mm.
So we covered many of the clients, right? So where
Mm.
they want to start with the ab initio, right? And
Okay.
they're working on this ab initio product, right now.
Okay. See, for this, because in city, right, so this Abinitio is going to be ruled out.
Ab initio is only?
Is going to be ruled out. Ruled out in the sense, since it is a licensed product, right?
Hmm.
So the chargeback will be more due to this reason. Many of the companies are ruling out submission and
Hmm.
going for the open source.
Hmm.
So this one and basically any other ETL tool, right? Once you will learn one technology, it will be
Hmm.
easy or how difficult it is to switch to other.
Right.
Just I'm asking how difficult it is to switch to other.
No,
Once
it's
you,
not difficult. It's not difficult. No, I thought like you learning one thing and it would be shifting is difficult or not. That's what you're asking, right?
yeah,
Okay. So first thing is, okay, so even though it is been getting ruled out or whatever it is, right? So currently, right, any ETL market, if you see, they're expecting, right? So it will be running on, right? It's not like all the way it will go at one time.
correct,
Okay.
correct. Yeah,
Definitely, it's running for a long time, and it will be there, and still the clients will be using it. Okay. So and whenever you got some chance of right moving out from this technology and all, right,
yes,
they'll
yes,
definitely consider this as a your experience, right, ETL experience, what
right,
on what platform you worked on already, right? It
correct.
might be any tool, but right now you could see many of the products in the city also running on the Ab initio only, right? So no,
Yeah,
it will not move. It will not move immediately and all, right? Okay, definitely. Okay, it
okay.
will take some time, slowly, right? Slowly, it will take some time, but
Mm.
definitely they need this knowledge also. Okay, so
Yeah, okay.
ETL knowledge also along with that, right? Then only you can do the things there itself, right? If you go for any other tool also. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so once we are learning here this tool, like other tools, like simply you name it like so and so, right? So all the way it is same things, right? What it does, but how it use, right? How it use, how it looks, right? How we call, all this will vary, right? But still, like ETL systematic ways remains same, right? There won't be any difference. Okay. So that is the thing, right? How it works.
Okay.
Okay. So
And
there is no issue on that. Yeah.
okay. And one more thing. So once I learn this, right, I mean, basically the market will, how it will be on Abinitio, because small companies and all, they are not using, only the bigger companies using this, right?
Yeah.
How
Let it
the
be.
chance of
Let it.
opportunity.
Yeah. So if it is available in every company, right, and all, right, so you'll have less importance, right?
Not exactly.
So you have less companies been implemented. Okay, suppose say
Yeah.
everything is been implemented in every company, right? So the thing is, like you'll find it's like more used, right? More used, more people are already there in the
More
market,
people are
right?
available. Yeah.
Right. So
Yeah.
if it's already, it's a tool, ETL solutions, wherever it has been implemented, definitely this would be also part of the ETL implementations, right?
Yeah.
So and that way you can find the opportunities, many clients, right? All the major MNCs.
Yeah. Why I'm asking is, so far I'm working on the Oracle PLSQL, so I want to just change based on this.
Yeah, definitely change is required for everyone, right? Like whoever is working on the current platform, they need to acquire something, right? After a few days, after a few years.
Mm.
Hmm.
So all the pay skills and are good for this.
Yeah, pay scales will be good, and you can find out. You can search for now also, right? In India, so many openings are going on, right? So pay scales also will be good way to very good, right? So if you're going with this ETL tools, right? Good salary they are paying, right? When some of the, like if you see like a client-based companies, right? Like City, all
Yeah.
states, right? So like you find some other companies, right? Where it is product-based companies, right? Wells
Okay.
Fargo, right? All this will pay good amount of salary, right? So
Yeah.
you can find like for 10 years and all, right? You can find 30 lakhs and all.
Okay. Okay. I will go through your document. I mean, what are the videos you shared, right,
Yeah,
yesterday?
yeah, yeah.
The architecture is defined. I mean, explained in that
Yeah,
two
architecture
sessions.
is covered in that session. You go through
Yeah.
it. It will be
Yeah.
clear, pretty much clear, right? So
Yeah.
if you have any questions, note down.
Yeah.
So we'll talk tomorrow.
Yeah.
And right, once I share the email also, right? So then onwards you can drop the emails also to me, right? On day to day,
Okay.
if
Okay.
you have anything
So,
also.
for this, any documentation you are providing? I mean, the material kind of.
Yeah, material I'll provide you, right? Yeah, material I'll provide you. So I'll help you to install this right on your machine directly.
Mm.
Okay, so that you can practice this hands-on.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. That's all, Kumar.
Okay, okay.
Sorry, Kumar, the connection was disconnected.
Okay, Krishna. Yeah, it looked like offline, right? I thought like you dropped off
Yeah, yeah.
somehow. There's a
No,
power cut
no.
or disconnect.
Yeah. There was a
Okay.
connection issue.
Hmm.
Actually, Kumar, yesterday I was trying to use your VMware session, but I couldn't
Ah,
do that.
uh-huh.
Already I have this in VM. I already have Windows XP and Abinitio.
Available?
And, yeah, it's available.
Okay. Hmm.
So just what I want is Linux and any other database to install in that.
No, no, still you can use this, right? And this VM also you can open it, right?
No,
Even though, uh
it's not allowing me to do that. Instead of sending email with screenshot.
no, like multiple VMs can be opened, right? Like, yeah, just you have to open one more, right? Name it with different name. That's it.
I tried it, but it's not allowing me to do that.
Okay, if
I want to
you
create
share the,
another
yeah,
VM session.
no, under VM session means how to link with this, right? Whatever I shared you, I can show it tomorrow also, right? Today or tomorrow if you want, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Open
yeah,
it and then
yeah,
keep it ready. I'll help you to open it.
yeah. Sure.
Okay, for now you use
So
it,
I
right?
think it's
Whatever you
getting
have it,
connected.
you use it. tomorrow, if you open that VM and are ready, keep it ready. By end of the session, I'll show you.
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, Krishna. Yeah, we'll see you tomorrow. Yeah, bye.